Welcome to our talk about exam advice, some thoughts on how to do well or at least just survive the end of the year essay exams. I recently sat down with Mrs. Haenze and the two of us talked it out, over a computer of course, about what advice we give to people, and then I compiled the advice, and here's the summary. I hope you find it useful. First point of advice: prepare well. And that might seem the first point of nonsense to you, because how do you prepare for an exam where you don't know what the questions are? Well, there are some things you can do. First, at UAM, you have a general idea. You can be pretty sure that they're going to relate to your IS topics. So go back and review them, and it also helps in preparation for your orals. Make sure you pay attention to the general topics, the structure of the ideas connected to them, the main themes that you're encountering, and be sure to pay attention to the specific vocabulary so that you can have that vocabulary ready to use in any potential exam questions. Next, I would argue that you need to prepare yourself, even if you're not necessarily preparing your answers in detail and in particular. First, get plenty of exercise and rest. And yes, I know during the exam session that can almost sound like a joke, but get as much as you can. The simple fact is that the more rest, the more exercise within reason that you can get, the better you're going to be thinking, the better you're going to be feeling. All of that will play into the idea of whether or not exams are going to be a horror story or just a difficult task. Stay hydrated. Being dehydrated or drinking lots of caffeinated drinks, coffee, Coca-Cola, whatever, can all have an effect on how well and how clearly you're thinking. And when you want to go into that exam session thinking as precisely as you can. And then finally, I would say practice. And practice as accurately as you can. You're going to be getting opportunities to do that in class with your timed essays. Take advantage of them. Take them seriously. And then practice on your own as well. If you have the opportunity to try to set up some kind of exam-type atmosphere, do it. Because the atmosphere itself is one of the most difficult things about these exams. The atmosphere provides more pressure than the content probably ever could. So the sooner you can get yourself used to that stressful atmosphere to where it doesn't bother you as much, the better you're likely to do. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have that live practice session like we talked about thanks to COVID-19, but if there's anything that you can think to do at home or near your home that can give you anything like that kind of sensation, if you can get a practice session in there, the more the better. And finally, don't forget resources like the Writing Center. After you've had your timed essays graded, take them into the Writing Center, or go see the Writing Center virtually, as the case may be at the moment, and get feedback on your essays so you can find out even more about where you're strong and where you're weak. Next, choose your topic and your essay mode carefully. Make sure you give this some serious thought. There's an English idiom that says, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And what this means is, if you can see a problem coming, if you can fix the problem before it becomes a problem, it takes far less time and effort to do that than to try to fix it after the problem has already grown into something big. That's going to sort of be your mantra for this entire essay process. What you want to do is use methods that allow you to do it right the first time, to fix problems before they happen, rather than try to fix them afterward when you have to spend twice as much time on them. So poorly chosen topics or a poorly chosen essay mode can sink you before you even start writing the essay. And yes, I'll say that again. If you choose your topic poorly, or if you choose the wrong essay mode, it's possible that you will fail the exam in practice before you've even started writing. So please take this seriously. First, some questions to start. You sit down, you've got the piece of paper in front of you, it's got 4 or 5 essay topics. How do you know which one to choose? I would advise to begin by asking these questions. First, which topic do I know the most about generally? If you know more about something, you'll have more intelligent things to say, hopefully, as opposed to something that you may not be so sure of. Next, what topic can I recall the most detail about? And by this, I don't just mean generally, I mean, do you have any specific facts or figures that you can remember? any details, names, places, dates, things that you can put into your essay if you were to choose to write on this topic that could give your essay more weight. Next, which topic am I most passionate about, and is that a problem? What I mean by that is, if you come across a topic that you really, really feel passionate about, on the one hand, that could be a good thing. It gives you a chance to get out there and really write something that you feel strongly about. Maybe it'll flow more easily. At the same time, it can be a problem because part of expository writing is staying objective and staying inside the formal objective style. If you feel very passionate about an issue that's maybe a moral issue, will you be able to write about this and have it come off sounding objective? And if you can't, then you're probably going to want to move on to another topic. And finally, which topic lends itself to a strong, clear thesis statement and plan of development? You should be able to look at the different topics, and there are some that will simply jump out at you that will enable you to write a thesis statement with an accompanying plan of development much more easily with much less thinking than some of the others would. So if you can find that, that's probably going to be the one you want to go for. Not necessarily, but it's something to think about. Once you think you have your topic identified, then move on and ask the question, which essay mode best fits this topic, and which one am I most comfortable discussing this topic inside? So you want to find the one, some essay topics will naturally express themselves better in certain essay modes. Definition might fit better for one as opposed to process analysis for another. And if you choose wrongly here, you can again cause yourself all kinds of trouble. If you're essentially trying to define something, but you're writing a cause and effect essay, it's not going to work too well. You're going to be at cross purposes, and your essay is going to sound pretty bad. Now, one quick caution to say here. Don't use a mode that you're not comfortable with, even if it makes sense for the particular topic that you've chosen. You know, as you've practiced these different expository essay modes, there are going to be some that you tend to like better than others. So if you found a topic that looks promising, but you have to write it in an essay mode that doesn't leave you excited, you may want to go back up and re-examine your topics. You may want to try to find one that will mesh better with the essay modes that you prefer. And so change topics if necessary. What you're going for here is a balance between the best topic you can find and the best mode to express it in. And be willing to have a little give and take on both sides. But again, take this seriously. It's worth spending 5 to 10 minutes of your time figuring this out if it saves you half an hour later on. Once you've got your topic and your mode figured out, my advice is stick to what you've learned. Another English proverb is that there's more than one way to skin a cat. Without getting into the grotesque details of that, what that means is that there's usually more than one way to do something. And that's equally true here with all of these various essay modes that we've been studying. If you go online and you actually do some more research, you'll find, for example, there are 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that you can write a good cause and effect essay. And once you've moved out beyond UIM, once you've gotten out of these basic classes, then great. Explore them, use them, but not here, not just yet, not in the exams. There may be many different ideas out there on how to write these, but don't get creative here. You want to stick to what you know. You want to stick to what the professors are expecting to see. And that gets down to what professors in exams want of your essay. They want to know, have you shown that you can do the job like we taught you? And if you're not doing the job like we taught you, they're going to have a tendency in the heat of grading to grade you down or even fail you. So stick to what you learned in class. And connected to that, based on some of the essays that I've seen in my grading time, if for some reason you missed one of the essay modes, or you don't remember exactly how you're supposed to do it, don't just Google it. Go talk to some of your group members, talk to some of your friends who've been through the class, find out or your professor for that matter, find out specifically what UIM expects of the essay that you're looking at. Don't just Google it, because if you just Google it, you're liable to find one of those other ways of skinning the cat, and if you do that in the exam, you can end up failing. So stick to what you've learned and do it well. All right, here's another big one. Take your outline seriously and take the outlining process seriously. If you haven't learned how to do this yet, if for some reason you missed it, go back to our Moodle, take a look at my outline lecture. It's also available in my YouTube channel. Please do this and do it well, do it right. Because more than anything else, a good outline can save you in exams. Remember that mantra of an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. Well, a good outline is more like 10 pounds of prevention that could prevent 100 pounds of cure. Your outline helps you to focus on covering the essentials. It lets you see that you have all of the basic elements of your essay ready to go and present in the proper order, just like you're going to have it in the final product. It's more important than niggling over grammar or style. Not that those aren't important and necessary too, but making sure you have that structure, you have all of the essentials, all of the essence of a good essay in the proper mode, with your thesis statement well placed. That is going to be one of the big things that makes the difference between passing and failing one of these exams, not simply whether you hit all the articles or not. So outlines prevent you from wasting time with major revisions. When you outline something properly, you're able to see how everything relates. You're able to see what the most basic aspect of each of your paragraphs is. You're able to look at your thesis statement and your plan of development in advance, and you're able to identify major problems, and you can fix them right there. If you have to shift paragraphs around, if you have to delete a paragraph and write a new one, better to find it out now when you're writing the outline and it takes 5 minutes than to find out after you've written your entire draft and now you've got to spend 50 minutes rewriting entire paragraphs later. So I can't emphasize this enough. Go ahead and plan to spend a good 15 to 20 minutes, or even more in some cases, getting your outline right. Don't rush the process. Take it seriously. Very much related to the outlining process, try to think structurally throughout the essay. And this is one reason why outlining is so important and why you need to take it so seriously, because the outlining process is where you boil your entire essay content down to structure, and you see how that structure holds up. Structure is your most fundamental issue. If you don't have the proper essay structure, nothing else really matters. What do I mean by that? Well, if you don't have 5 working paragraphs with a clear thesis statement, and topic sentences relating back to that thesis statement, and a matching plan of development, then you could have the most beautiful grammar in the world, and you're still going to be writing gobbledygook. If we can't find your thesis, if we can't see how your thesis relates to everything else, if you don't have a good hook, if you don't have a good mic drop moment, all of those things that are so important to holding the structure together, the transitions, if you don't have all of that in place, nothing else you do is really going to make that much of a difference. So make sure that you understand the structure of all the basic essay modes very well. If you're not doing it already, write them out in outline form and memorize them. And then when you sit down to write your outline in the exam, apply them consistently. Don't get distracted. Stay focused on getting that structure right. Next point, be as precise as you can in your language. Resist the temptation to be vague. And this can be tough because you've been essentially thrust into a situation where you do not have the opportunity to prepare. You do not have the opportunity to bring in a bunch of detail. You don't know what these essay topics are going to be in advance, so you can't know exactly what information you're going to need. You just have to take sort of general guesses, and so you're going to have a tendency to want to hedge your bet, as it's called. You're going to want to talk very, very generally. Well, try not to do that if at all possible. For one thing, it makes you sound far less confident in what you're talking about, and it actually can make you sound uninformed. It sounds like you don't know what you're talking about. Avoid the likes of things like since the dawn of time, or for many years, or since the old days, or nowadays, etc., etc., etc. And what does since the dawn of time actually mean? How many people do you think actually know when the dawn of time supposedly was? And do you literally mean that this has been happening for 13 billion something years? Yeah, probably not. So it just sounds like overly florid, cliched language. It really doesn't tell us anything other than a really, really long time. So what could you replace that with? You might try to give a specific idea, like in the medieval period, or during the war years, where the context makes clear which war you're talking about, or since the 1960s, so on and so forth. Go for precision over vagueness every chance you get, because it's going to give your writing much more impact and make your essay far more impressive. Next, use evidence to demonstrate your points, as opposed to simply asserting your points. Now remember that nothing is true or a fact because you or I happen to think it. When we're dealing with facts and we're trying to say things that are true, we deal in evidence, we deal in proofs. And you have to remember why people read expository essays in the first place, or expository writing in general. They're not here for a creative opinion. They're not here for all kinds of uninformed vagueness. They're here looking for facts and truth. And so if you give them a vague, uninformed opinion, then you're going to undermine the quality, you're going to undermine the impact, and the overall point of your entire essay. Now, I know this is difficult because, again, you're going into these essays not knowing exactly what the topics are going to be. So as much as possible, you may not be able to do it as much as you'd like, but as much as possible, make sure to use facts and data and logic as much as you can to really show what you're talking about, not simply assert it. So prove your points, demonstrate your points, don't just talk about them. Another good point of advice that Mrs. Haenze really emphasized is commit, commit, commit. Don't second guess yourself. Don't spend a lot of time overanalyzing your position and overanalyzing whether you've succeeded in this, that, or the other. Make sure that you choose a course and you stay that course and go straight through. Another way of putting this is that know when to stop analyzing or editing. In a non-timed essay, it's kind of hard to find a time when it's not good to analyze or edit, because you can always find a way to make what you're writing better. Even if you've spent hours and hours and hours and hours on something, you'll go back a day or two later, or even later than that, maybe even after a thing is published, and you'll take it apart again and you'll see, I should have said this, I should have said that. It's not possible in a timed essay. You will never write an exam essay that you can't make better. So go into the exam having given up on trying. Why? Because it is a huge waste of time writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and trying to adjust this and trying to fix that, and then you want to tweak this and oh, you should have added that there, and then you could say this better here. In the exam situation, time is at an absolute premium. And so you don't want to waste even a precious second going back to second guess something. So in short, a full and complete, if imperfect essay is going to be better than a half-finished perfect one. Now, of course, I'm not saying don't fix problems, but make sure that the problems you fix don't cause a whole cascade of other problems, and expect that there are going to be problems that you're going to have to look at and say, should I fix this now? Probably not. I should probably let it go and just see how it flies. There will be imperfections that you're going to have to just accept in order to get a much better overall result. When it comes to editing, don't plan on multiple drafts of your essay. Try to make one draft and then make small edits along the way to fix problems. So go ahead and plan on not doing the multiple drafts thing. The fact is, you're just not going to have time to write the entire essay 2 or 3 times in a row. And don't count words. Going back and counting words is just literally a waste of time. My advice, if you feel like you really must count words, is before you go into the exam, write a couple of practice essays and count up the number of words you have on each line and find out what your average words per line are. Then you can go back and in only a fraction of the time, you can count the number of lines that you have and you can find a ballpark figure for how many words that you've got. You at least know if you're where you should be generally or you're very short. But do not go back and count each individual word trying to make sure that you land exactly on a certain number. This not drafting thing, too, is one of the reasons why outlining is so essential. I know that I and Mrs. Haenze both sound like broken records talking about outlining over and over and over again, but it's absolutely imperative that you do it and do it right. If you do your outline well, if it's well conceived, well written, you do all of the changes in the outlining process, then you're not going to need to write another draft. Now, you will need to go back and use some basic editing strategies to catch small things like spelling errors, short grammar issues, those sorts of things, punctuation problems. You'll want to be able to fix that. So plan to leave about 20 minutes at the end of the exam period for your proofreading. And probably the number one thing that you can do to help this process is actually to read your essay backwards. And that may sound strange, but it works. Read your essay backwards, sentence by sentence, and if you have time, do it word by word. Now, why do you do that? Well, the human brain has a tendency to see what it wants to see. It has a tendency to see what it expects to see rather than what's actually there. So if you read your essay forward, then your brain often has a tendency to see what you meant to write instead of what's actually on the page. And I do that all the time. It drives me crazy. You'll have a misspelled word, and because you know how to spell that word, and because you expect to see that word spelled correctly, you fly right over it without realizing that you misspelled this. Maybe you've got a big problem with grammar in a particular sentence. Maybe a sentence, even your thesis statement, makes no sense whatsoever. But the fact is, because you're reading what you expect it to say, you are missing the entire problem. So if you go backwards, if you make yourself read it backwards, you lose those expectations. In fact, your brain has to reset with each sentence and with each word. That makes it much easier for you to read what's actually on the page as opposed to what you expect to be on the page. So if you do that, you'll be able to go back and catch a lot of those smaller issues that you can make quick fixes for without having to rewrite the entire paper. So don't plan to draft. Do plan to make those smaller edits. Finally, above all and hardest of all, try your best to relax. Now, I know this is probably going to sound like the most ridiculous point of advice at all, because it is far more easily said than done. You're certainly not going to be able to take the essay with your feet propped up, looking out at the open ocean, drinking a nice calming drink, listening to some beautiful music. It's going to be nothing like that. It's probably going to be hot. It's going to be stuffy. You're going to be crammed into an exam session with a whole bunch of other people all sitting around you scribbling, trying to do as best as they possibly can. Or who knows what it'll be like this time with the COVID-19 crisis. The fact is, we don't know. Maybe it'll be better. Maybe it'll be worse. The fact that that everything's going to be so up in the air is probably going to make it worse. So it's going to be harder than ever to relax. But if there's anything that you can do to figure it out, this is going to be one of the best things that you can do. So here are some points to bear in mind. One of the first things you can do is breathe. I tell my students this all the time. When you get into the exam, don't immediately start writing. Don't hyperventilate. Try to take a couple of long, deep breaths, collect yourself, and look at the exam paper and figure out what you're going to do. While you're going through the whole process, continue to take those deep breaths. Keeping your body well oxygenated and calm is a big part. Next, think ahead and try to have a plan. We've talked about a lot of things that you can do to prepare. Prepare for them, and then when you sit down, figure out what your plan is going to be. I would actually suggest jotting down a very quick time schedule. How much do you want to spend on your outline? How much do you want to spend on the actual drafting process? At what point will be your halfway point? When should you transition into the editing phase that we talked about? Go ahead and write all of that down and keep an eye on the time. That way, you'll have some idea of where you're going, and it'll feel more like you're in control. Next, again, practice. As I said earlier, try to give yourself as many opportunities to practice this type of exam as you can. I know it might sound like a form of torture, but sit down and time yourself if you have the opportunity. Put yourself in that type of situation as much as you possibly can. The more you do it, the easier it will come when it matters, and you won't feel quite so stressed out. Another thing that you can consider is to try to learn some basic meditation techniques. And I know this sounds so cheesy to so many of us. I used to think it was cheesy too until I learned some of it practicing kendo when I was in graduate school and just after. But learn to practice some basic meditation techniques. If you can take 5 minutes in the exam and calm yourself down, bring your brain back under control, you will be so much more effective in the rest of the exam, and it'll be worth every second that you spend on it. And finally, do not compare yourself to others in the exam room. I know you're surrounded by your friends and group members. You're surrounded by people maybe you're competing with. You're worried about what are they doing? What am I doing? How am I comparing to them? Don't do that. When you sit down in that exam room, try to make yourself focus on nothing but yourself and that exam paper. You've got the entire time to write the best essay that you possibly can, and it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing around you. So, for example, don't panic when someone finishes early. Don't start thinking, oh, they're already done? Well, I'm only halfway finished with my second body paragraph. What's wrong with me? I'm running out of time. I better go work harder. I better work faster. I better catch up. Well, the truth is, the person who finished it so early might have finished it because they're an idiot. Maybe they didn't know what they were writing about and they ran out of stuff to write about. It's entirely possible. The thing is, you don't know, and you never will know, well, certainly not until after the exam is over. So you don't worry about them. Worry about yourself and worry about what's going on right in front of you. Try to block out everyone else if you possibly can. Well, everyone except for the professors who are administering the exam. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this talk, and I hope that we've given you some good advice, some good tactics and strategies for not only preparing for the exam, but for surviving it. And so with that, I wish you good luck and Godspeed. Go forth and conquer.